Hello and welcome. So I'm going to do the next steps based off of the previous video. So still doing DMVPN. And in the previous video, it was using IKEv2 and the phase one kind of topology where it was just hub and spoke. And so I want to do phase two, which allows for dynamic spoke to spoke configuration. And moving to IKEv2, there's what appears to be like a couple bugs. I don't know if it's with the CML or the virtual machines of the router or what's going on. So it takes a little bit of playing around with it to get it to work. But basically just want to show a working example and just briefly cover the differences when we're going from the previous video for both IKEv2 and then also phase two, the dynamic spoke-to-spoke tunnels. So basically, not going to go too in depth on the IKEv2 proposals, policies, and things of this nature because it's been covered in other videos, but we're going to IKEv2 here. So we have IKEv2 proposal, a policy that references or encapsulates that proposal. Same IPsec transform set as was in the previous video. And the one difference in the IPsec profile from the previous video in the IKEv1 version is we've added a reference to the IKEv2 profile. So in IKEv1 version of this DMVPN in the previous video, we just had the transform set referenced, and in this case, we're also referencing the IKEv2 profile, and so that's basically the initial link. So this IPsec profile will be referenced in the tunnel, the GRE tunnel configuration, and then so we have this IKEv2 profile, which has the reference to the keyring, and then references for pre-shared key, and then the two different, since this is the HQ or hub router, the peer IPs of R1 and R2, and then as I mentioned, it references the keyring, which again has the actual pre-shared key for both R1 and R2. And then for the tunnel interface, the differences are that we add the no IP next hop self EIGRP1 command. So basically when the EIGRP routing updates are going through, it won't replace the next hop value it'll retain that instead of replacing it with the tunnel IP address for the hub. So it'll leave the different spokes as the next hop IP as appropriate. And then that's pretty much the only difference for the hub or HQ router. And for the spokes, the only real difference is that when we go to the tunnel configuration for GRE tunnel, instead of having a tunnel destination and then the IP address of the hub, now we're changing it to GRE multipoint like a hub would have. So this is what's allowing the dynamic tunnels from spoke to spoke. And then everything else is the same. And so essentially what I'm going to do is all of this configuration in the template here is all correct and it's working. But if I were to paste all this in at once on each one of the routers, it actually doesn't work. There's something going on with, as I mentioned, like a bug or I don't know what, and I've seen on other people's videos, they seem to have some similar problems. It seems to be related when you're doing IKEv2, and then this reference to the tunnel protection and that IPsec profile. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in all the configuration except for the tunnel protection. We'll see the GRE tunnel come up. We'll see DMVPN and everything working with the dynamic spoke-to-spoke tunnels. But at that point, it's not actually going to be protected by IPsec. And then I'm going to do some, hopefully, kind of the sequence that seems to make all this stuff work and finally come up and be protected by IPsec, and then using that IKEv2 configuration that we have. So just get right to it, and we'll see if I can get this working. So I'm going to copy everything in the template except for that tunnel protection for the HQ router. Paste that in. And then I'm also going to grab the DHCP config. I'm going to go to ISP. Copy in that. And again, this is all just all the same stuff from the previous video. And I'll go to R1. Copy all this except for the tunnel protection. Oops. Paste in the DHCP config, and I'll move to R2. Paste that in. So at this point, going to be expecting to see everything up for the DMVPN. Now the other issue that I'm kind of up against here is I noticed that the console messages won't show up if you have like extracted a configuration. So it seems as in this version of CML, if you've extracted the configuration, the console messages just stop showing. Same with debug and anything else. And then if you import that lab, you're not going to get any console or debug messages. So a number of issues to get this to actually work, but should be able to do it and follow the same sequence that I've kind of got figured out here. So at this point, we'll do on HQ, we'll do show DM VPN. And then sure enough, we have two of the tunnels up, dynamic. First one here is going to be R1. Second one here is going to be R2. And if I do show IP route, I've learned I'm learning LAN subnets via EIGRP through the tunnel interface, like I would expect. So that all looks normal and a good indication. So I'm on R1, I do show DMVPN, and I have the single tunnel to the hub right now. And the same thing on R2, if I go show DMVPN, tunnel's been established with the hub. Now if I ping the tunnel interface of R1, which is 192.168.10.2, I get a response, and if I run show DMVPN again, now I have a dynamic tunnel over to R1, and then if I run that same command on R1, so now we can see that the dynamic spoke-to-spoke tunnels are working just fine, but we have no IPsec protection. And because if I would put that on initially, none of this actually will come up and work. So at this point, I'm going to start up the Linux host, and they'll be able to get DHCP addresses. And I'm going to run some pings and trace routes on those, which will all look correct. And then I'm going to put in and kind of play this game with the tunnel protection and the IPsec profile of putting it on and removing. And at the end of that, we should get the IKEv2 tunnel up in this this DMVPN traffic protected by IPsec. So I'll start jumping into the Linux hosts. Okay, so all these are up on DHCP like you're expecting. So if I go from the Linux host on R1's LAN, I want to ping 10.5.10.2, which is the one on R2's LAN. So I'll go ping 10.5.10.2, which I get a response. If I do a trace route, 10.5.10.2, I'm expecting to see the second hop be the 192.168.10.3, which is the tunnel IP for R2, and we do see that. So the DMVPN phase 2 definitely working. We definitely have dynamic spoke-to-spoke tunnels working. And then I'll do the same on this one. So 10.16.30.2. So I get a ping there. I'll do a trace route to that. And then second hop will be 192.168.10.2, which is the tunnel interface for R1. So that all looks correct. And then, of course, there's not going to be any issue pinging the Linux host on the HQ LAN, so 172.16.20.2. So everything's completely working for DMVPN, phase 2, and dynamic spoke-to-spoke tunnels. So now we'll hopefully play this game of getting the IPsec working. And this is going to seem weird, but I'm not sure why the router software is causing so much issues. So, oops. So I'm going to go into config mode. I want to go into the tunnel interface for R2. And I'm going to say, I'm going to put it on for the first time here. I'm going to do tunnel protection. Actually, before I do that, I think I'm going to leave these pings running on the... So I'll do a ping 10.5.10.2. I'm going to leave that running. Have all these pings running in it. And then basically, we're going to see those stop as soon as I put on this tunnel protection on all the routers. So So I'm on R2, it's tunnel interface, put in the tunnel protection config in for the first time. And you can see here, as soon as I did that, the ping stopped. Of course, I need to get that on the other routers, so phase ton 0, paste that in. Now you would think that this would work, but in reality it doesn't. So the pings on R1's Linux have stopped. Pings on HQ's LAN have stopped. And pings on R2's LAN have stopped. So what I'm finding that I have to do to make this work is I'll say no to the tunnel protection. And I'll also say no to the IPsec profile. And then I'm going to put the IPsec profile back on. And then I'm going to put the tunnel protection back on. And if I follow the same procedure for all the routers, then it should all start working. Wouldn't ever expect to have to do this, but that's exactly the kind of sequence that I've found that actually gets this working. Okay, so the last one to do here is the HQ. I've got an extra space in there that's kind of messing me up here. And for the last time, put the tunnel protection back on. And we'll see what happens. So now you see the pings start going again. So I can't say what is really wrong here, whether it's like the iOS on these virtual machines or if it has something to do with CML, but I have seen another person's channel where they were doing weird stuff like this to get it to actually work with the IPsec protection. So the R1's Linux is good. I'm seeing pings again on R2's Linux, and then pings are running again on HQ Linux. So that's really good. And then let's take a look at, so R1, show crypto, IKEv2 SA. So I've got 2 tunnels up, one to R2, and the other to HQ, the hub. Show DMVPN. Again, still got that dynamic tunnel to R2 and the static to HQ hub. And then we'll see the same thing here. Show crypto IKEv2 SA. Show DMVPN. So pretty much everything you expect. Another cool command I didn't really ever use that I saw in another person's video today is show crypto session, which is cool. Interface tunnel 0, shows what DMVPN profile is the IPsec profile that's being used. You can see the IKEv2 Security Association, IPsec flow between the two pair IPs. And so I'm on a R2 perspective, so that's going to be the dynamic tunnel for R1. And then the second one here is going to be the tunnel for the hub HQ. And so if I do show IP interface, or actually show IP route, we're still getting the EIGRP routes over the tunnel interface. That would have, when I had initially put the tunnel protection on, it kind of brings things down, and we would have lost the routing at that point until I played around with the IPsec profile and the tunnel protection. But at any rate, those come back up. So I have the dynamic routing over the GRE tunnel protected by IKEv2 here. So that's pretty much it. Show crypto IP session. So same thing here. Show IP NHRP NHS detail. It's showing the connection to the hub for the NHRP database. 13 requests sent, 5 replies, and 2 failed. The failed ones are almost guaranteed to be during the time when I originally put the tunnel protection on, and then they started working again. So that's interesting. We do the same thing on this one. Show IP NHRP NHS detail, and then very similar here. 2 failed, 12 sent, 5 replies. So yeah. That was kind of a weird way of going about it, but this is definitely totally working for what we want. And then just a quick recap of the difference between previous video where we were doing IKEv1 and hub and spoke. Now we're doing IKEv2 and spoke-to-spoke dynamic. So really the only differences are that we're doing IKEv2. So of course we got to have a policy, phase 1 policy for IKEv2, same phase 2 transform set. In the IPsec profile, we're adding in an additional command to make the main link of all the IKEv2 configuration that's been added in here. Setting an IKEv2 profile, and then of course that IPsec profile is referenced in the tunnel protection of the tunnel interface. Every router here has got a pre-shared key for the other two. So when it's HQ, we've got R1, R2. And again, this no IP next hop self command is the only thing that's added to the HQ hub's tunnel config. Everything else is exactly the same. And then on the spoke, again, we're doing tunnel mode GRE multipoint, and that is the only difference in configuration. So not a whole lot different. It's just quite difficult to get it working. You do a couple tricks here, and then it's working with this CML setup. So hopefully that was helpful. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.